Yo, what's up my peeps? Cosmic Fire for the win here, back with another video, and today we are doing our first video on the Cosmic Fire Reacts and Podcast channel. So we're gonna be reacting to this video right here, so that'll be pretty fun. You guys can't see it yet, but it's gonna be pretty awesome. Kind of disturbing, but it's gonna be pretty awesome, so yeah, that'll be pretty cool. Okay, so let's get into it. So we have this video right here. Not sure how good the resolution is going to be or the FPS, but we're going to give it a try. And you might have seen this guy right here react to it. This guy's a really cool YouTuber I've been watching, so check him out. I've seen him react to this, but I thought I'd react to it as well because I've never really done that.
Mossdale Cave Incident. It was June 24th, 1967, and 10 cavers were about to enter Mossdale Cavern to help clear some of the deeper passages and map them out. The two leaders of the group had already explored this cave before, which reassured everyone else. This particular cavern was known for its tight spaces and the very few areas where a person could fully stand.
Already, yeah, I'm not a fan of tight spaces. I swear I am claustrophobic. This is just nuts. I would not fucking do this, I'll tell you. I would not do this. If you're crazy, if you value your life, if you don't value your life, you can do it, I guess. But if you value your life, don't do it. Or just be very careful.
And after a few hours inside, 4 of the cavers realized how difficult the cave actually was and decided to return to the surface. They noticed a cloudy sky, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The remaining cavers continued their descent until they reached the far marathon passage, which measured only 18 inches by 12 inches, with a small stream of water flowing along the bottom. Everything seemed to be going well, and the group on the surface soon noticed that it had started raining, so they took cover. Initially, the rain did not seem concerning, but the cavers inside began to notice rising water levels. When the water became alarmingly high, they decided to end the day's work.
Let's go in. Let's still stay in here while there's water rising. What a great idea. What a stupid freaking idea, I'm telling you. That is the dumbest damn idea I've ever heard of. Jeez, people are freaking nuts, man.
And head back, even though they were still 3 hours from the entrance. Meanwhile, the surface group spotted something terrifying. A lake of water had formed around the cave's entrance.
Oh, that's horrible.
The cavers inside had no idea how much water was about to flood the cave. The surface group ran to get help, while the cavers frantically tried to reach higher chambers. However, the water continued to rise, pressing toward their faces. Rescuers and hundreds of volunteers worked tirelessly, pumping water out of the cave and pumping oxygen inside, hoping that the cavers had found a safe chamber. Unfortunately, every one of the cavers drowned. Shaft sinkhole tragedy. It was May 28, 1973, and a group of 9 diving experts had planned a dive at Mount Gambier.
Alright, now that's pretty terrible. That is really horrible that he couldn't make it out. I'm telling you, that's pretty damn bad, you know? But rest in peace, man. Rest in peace. That's freaking insane.
Shaft sinkhole. This sinkhole had a unique feature. There was only a tiny opening leading to a cave with a lake 20 feet below. From this opening, a beam of light went down into the cave and onto the lake, which was extremely helpful for the divers' orientation. This beam was visible throughout most of the cave, unless divers ventured too deep into one of the 2 side branches. Everyone initially agreed that they would stay within a 200-foot maximum depth range so they could remain in the main chamber and still see the guiding light. This was their only plan. On the second day, however, 4 divers planned to go to the western section of the cave, aiming for a depth of 250 feet, which would have been a new record.
And because light can't get down that far? That's just horrible. That really is just freaking terrible. Imagine going somewhere where light can only go so far. You know what physics are. You know that light can only travel so far through a liquid. That's just insane. It's like what we see in the Marianas Trench. It's insane.
This was deeper than initially intended and posed a significant risk because in 1973, divers were still using regular air cylinders rather than mixed gas tanks. For this reason, they had to be more cautious as they went downwards because nitrogen narcosis might have settled in. As they went
That's
down,
scary.
the increasing pressure would have pushed the nitrogen into the bloodstream, producing a state of consciousness that is similar to when people are drunk. Keep in mind that these divers were not very experienced in cave diving. They were more accustomed to standard open water scuba diving. This added even more risk to their plan. They started going downwards into the western section of the cave, and one experienced diver noticed that nitrogen narcosis was kicking in, so
the
he
light
immediately
dropped
went
off.
back out. Several of them followed him and went back to the surface as well, but 4 of them kept going, determined to set the record and get a quick look before resurfacing. After a minute or so, the group at the surface became concerned, realizing the 4 divers would soon exhaust their air supply. A few returned to the cave to find them, and they discovered a flashlight and a camera on the bottom, but no trace of the divers. There was a problem that we haven't yet mentioned: silt. The movements of the 4 divers stirred up the long settled silt into a sand cloud that would take a lot of time to settle back. This reduced visibility to less than an arm's length, removing any hope for orientation for the underwater divers. Without
Dude, imagine that. Imagine visibility getting so horrible that you can barely even see your hand in front of your face. That's just so scary. That is insane.
being able to see anything, oxygen running dangerously low, and nitrogen narcosis kicking in, the 4 divers drowned. Jacob's Well tragedy. It's November 23rd, 1983, and 2 students from Texas State University, named Richard and Clark, are about to enter Jacob's Well, an underwater hole that leads to an underwater cave. This hole seems relatively shallow, around 25 feet, and many people try to touch the bottom and then come up. However, this is just a deceiving appearance because it actually leads to another underwater cave with 3 chambers. The first 2 are relatively open and easy to get through, but the third one has a really small squeeze to get into it. If you manage to squeeze through, you'll enter a room that is 10 feet tall, and you'll see a really small hole at the farthest edge, too small to pass through. This small tunnel was just 2 feet in diameter, and 2 years prior, 2 people died in it because after they managed to get through, a rock slide filled with gravel blocked them inside.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, let's go through it. That's a great idea. Let's go, man. Let's go on a trip. We're gonna go to this cave. We're gonna go under the ground. We're gonna go all the way to it. And even though there's 2 people that die, we won't die. Dude, what are people's problems? Seriously. People are insane.
getting back to our 2 students, they were fairly experienced in normal diving, but not in cave diving, and they were trying to get their instructor certification in open water diving. Their instructor, Don, was an incredibly skilled and experienced diver, and he was the one who removed the 2 bodies we just talked about. He used to constantly warn everybody to stay away from Jacob's Well since it's deadly, and he even tried to cover up the small hole that leads to the 4th chamber with some cement, but other divers reopened it and left a message that said, "You can't keep us out." Don himself almost died
We
in
have
Jacob's
the
Well.
freedom
When he tried
to
to enter
cave.
the 4th chamber, a gravel slide trapped him in the tunnel. He almost resigned himself to death. His tank was empty, and he had swallowed some water when his survival instinct kicked in, and he started rapidly moving until he cleared enough gravel to escape. When he did, he saw his diving colleague extending a regulator for him to breathe. As he started resurfacing, the air inside his body expanded until he reached almost 4 times his normal body size. By the time he broke the surface, he was screaming in pain. His belly was huge because his stomach had completely ruptured. These stories caught
Imagine that. Imagine your stomach getting. That's like four stomachs. That's like this. That is like insane. That had to hurt so badly.
the attention of Richard and Clark, who wanted to take a look for themselves, even though they didn't really know much about cave diving. On November 23rd, 1983, they went into Jacob's Well and reached the 3rd chamber, where the small hole was located. Richard removed his tank to get through the hole and started going in while holding his tank. When Clark removed his own oxygen tank and tried to get in, he saw Richard's face and noticed Richard didn't have the tank with him anymore and was suffocating. Clark quickly reached for the regulator and gave it to him, letting him breathe again. They started passing the regulator back and forth as they made their way out, and somehow they managed to get through the tight squeeze of the 3rd chamber. They then began making their way toward the exit until a terrifying sound caught their attention, a clank from their oxygen tank. Not only did this mean they'd hit a wall with the tank, so they were going the wrong direction,
You went the wrong way. You went the wrong damn way. That's horrible. Imagine going the wrong way. I mean, I've been in the cornfields and in certain stargazing spots, and I've gone the wrong way, and I've got freaking lost and had to jump through a sticker bush to get home. But I was above land, you know, I was on land. This is underwater. That's freaking scary.
It also meant the tank was almost empty.
Like, even though it was pitch black when I was stargazing, and now imagine being underwater in the pitch black.
They realized
Horrible.
they'd run into the false chimney in the first chamber, a tunnel that looks like it leads to the surface, but is actually a dead end. Clark managed to swim back to the surface and gasped for air after covering an incredible 75 feet in a single breath. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for Richard, who remained behind and drowned. When
Why
Clark
wouldn't
called the
you
police for
wait for
assistance,
Richard?
Don the instructor himself showed up and was stunned to see his students there. Gollum's Cave. It's August 18th, 2005, and a group of 5 friends decided to venture into the Gollum Cave, also called the Cave of Death because of how dangerous it was. They reached the entrance at 3 a.m., and one of the friends decided to wait for the others outside. They encountered their first...
Huh. Oh, man. Imagine getting up at 3 a.m. being like, dude, we're going caving. You reached it at 3 a.m. You freaking reached the cave at 3 a.m. What time did you leave? 12 midnight? That's just freaking nuts. Imagine that.
problem when actually trying to get in, as they had to crawl through a small pool of water. After that, there was a fork going left and right, and they chose left, which led
I'd go
them to
left,
another
too.
small pool of water. This seemingly innocent pool, however, actually led to another section of the cave through an underwater tunnel. The tunnel itself was really small, just 3 to 4 feet in diameter, and to get through it, you had to be completely submerged. This meant only one person at a time could go in, and they had to swim about 15 feet. One by one, they started plunging into the pool of water to reach the other side of the cave, and once they made it, they discovered a section with about 3 feet of airspace. From the perspective of the friend who stayed outside, there was no sound or light.
I wouldn't do this. I really wouldn't. And if I was to ever do this, I would bring a freaking pickaxe with me so I can dig the rocks if I ever got stuck. Would it work? I don't know. It could. It could. It's worth a shot, you know? I would literally do that. I would bring a pickaxe or some sort of device that would allow me to make a bigger hole in case I ever got stuck. That's insane.
Coming from inside the cave, and after a while he started to get worried. He went into the cave himself, but heard no noises and saw no lights. Not sure what to do, he first called some friends who had experience with caving, and then called the police. He couldn't have imagined what was happening inside. The 4 friends who went in probably realized that the 3 feet of airspace they'd reached had bad air, which is a term cavers use for air that doesn't have the normal balance of
Bad
gases,
air.
meaning there's more carbon dioxide and less oxygen. This reduces your ability to think, move, and breathe properly, making the return swim through
like
that narrow
being
tunnel
drunk.
super risky. They tried to get back out one at a time, but the first person who went underwater was unable to find the exit hole before running out of breath. That happened because the increased carbon dioxide messed with her ability to hold her breath and think clearly. After 30 to 60 seconds, the second person went in and found the first one, and so on, until
And they
all of them
flattened
got
out.
stuck in the
Everyone
tunnel. The
freaking
police arrived and
died.
tried to
Everyone
pump in
fucking
oxygen
died.
and
That's
pump out
horrible.
water, while family and friends waited anxiously outside the cave. Unfortunately, it was all in vain. The bodies were later recovered, and the cave was eventually closed off with cement. Sterkfontein Cave Incident. It was September 29, 1984. A cave explorer named Nuno Gomes was exploring unmapped
Just bodies. Imagine that. Your best friend just dies, and then you die, and then the next person dies, and then the next person dies, and these bodies just stack up in the cave. That's just horrible.
sections of the Sterkfontein Cave in South Africa. He was accompanied by his 2 friends, Peter Verhulsel and Malcolm, and together they planned to lay a guideline from the entrance to the farthest point of the wet cave area known as Milner Hall. The plan was for Nuno to go in and place the guideline, while Peter and Malcolm waited outside, assisting him from the surface. Nuno plunged into the water and successfully laid the line, covering a distance of 396 feet from the entrance to the end. Happy because of the success, the 3 decided to go back in and follow the new guideline. Once they reached the air pocket at the end, they were satisfied that they had succeeded successfully map this cave section, so they turned around and began to head out, following the line. As Nuno led the group, he suddenly felt Malcolm touch him. Malcolm was signaling that Peter was no longer behind them. Nuno went back to see where Peter had gone and noticed that he had entered a side tunnel. Nuno tapped Peter to get his attention and signaled him to return to the guideline and exit the cave. As they headed back, however, Peter disappeared again. This time, Nuno and Malcolm assumed he had taken the other exit, avoiding the tight squeeze they themselves used, so they did not go back to look for him. When Nuno and Malcolm surfaced and realized Peter was not there and still hadn't come out after a while, they submerged once more to look for him. They searched along the guideline and even in the side tunnels, but there was no sign of him. After 4 long hours, they ran out of air.
It's like being stuck in the back rooms. You know, you have to go through all these mazes, but now imagine it this way instead of this way on a plane. That's insane.
Air tanks, and the stirred-up silt reduced visibility to almost nothing. Finally, late that afternoon, they exited the cave and called for help. The fire brigade arrived, but lacking cave diving expertise, had to wait for the police divers to continue the search in the evening. The silt was so stirred up that visibility was heavily impaired. The police called off the search for the night, convinced they would now be searching for a body rather than a survivor. What no one realized was that Peter was not dead at all. He had been sidetracked by a secondary tunnel, and the cave's complex 3D structure, combined with the lack of a guideline, the stirred-up silt, and the darkness, made it nearly impossible for him to orient himself. After trying many possible paths, Peter found a small room and decided to wait there for rescuers. He shone his light into the water in hopes of signaling his friends, but when no one came for a long time, he switched it off to conserve the little battery life remaining. He tried making noise by banging his tank on the rocks, but to no avail. Eventually, he became exhausted, fell asleep, and lost track of time. After that first night of searching, the police closed off the cave so no one else could enter. Unfortunately, the silt took a long time to settle, so visibility remained poor. Convinced Peter had not survived, the police decided to wait a full week before resuming the search. On October 6th, 7 days after Peter's disappearance, they returned but found no sign of him. Another week passed before they tried again, but he was nowhere to be seen. Meanwhile, Peter was still alive. He had spent 14 days in complete darkness, starving and having lost much of his weight. Hoping for a way out, he decided to follow a passage leading from the small room where he had sheltered. After traveling 120 feet away from the water, he discovered it was only a dead end, so he returned to his spot near the water to wait once more for rescuers. The police continued weekend searches for 6 weeks, but they never found him and finally called off the search with no result. At that point, they reopened the dry sections of the cave, but kept the water section closed. Volunteers then began looking for a connection between the dry and wet cave systems, and Nuno joined them. His contributions were crucial. He was the one who discovered the connection where they could enter the wet section of the cave. It was there that they found a set of footprints leading to a dead end, and soon after, Peter's body. Beside his body was a message that read, "I love you, Cheryl and Ma." It was later discovered that one diver had come really close to finding him, as he entered an opening that was just 100 feet away from Peter's location. The autopsy revealed that he died of starvation after 3 weeks in the cave. Although we may criticize Peter's decision to explore on his own, we should also respect the fact that he fought to survive until the very end. Crooked Swamp Incident.
Remember, bring food with you if you go caving. Don't fucking just go without any food. Bring bars, bring a couple boxes of them. Because you never know if you can get lost in a cave and not find your way out, I'll tell you that. I'd bring a freaking ham sandwich, bars, I'd bring a bunch of things, Lunchables, I'd pack all kinds of shit, I'm telling you. It's scary.
It was March 27th, 1982, and Donald Weltner, along with his 2 sons, Christopher and Roger, were about to lead a group of 12 Boy Scouts on a day of cave exploration. This wasn't Donald's first time caving, and even though the passages in the Crooked Swamp cave system were notoriously narrow, he wasn't too concerned. Donald was bigger than the other participants, so if he could get through, the rest of the group could too. At 2 o'clock, they entered the cave through its 16 by 28-inch entrance and stopped in a room inside. Donald was on the eastern side and noticed several smaller tunnels leading from the room. However, because they weren't sure which passages would be too narrow, Donald decided to check one. It involved a tight squeeze but appeared to open to another section, so he tried to push through. The squeeze measured 18 by 20 inches, so tight that he couldn't move his arms backward or lift his head to see ahead. He was followed by his sons, and while moving forward thanks to the mud, making the terrain slippery, he reported back to them what was happening. Everything seemed normal until something unexpected occurred. As he pulled himself along, he realized the ground below him was disappearing. Donald slipped down into a tight crevice, and the slick mud prevented him from stopping his slide.
Oh
His hands were trapped,
no.
leaving him no leverage to pull himself up. Making matters worse, the path angled about 30 degrees, so he had to fight against gravity. The crevice was just 5 inches wide, and the slippery mud caused his body to settle more and more. He told his sons to pull on his feet, but after several failed attempts, he told them to get the other adult in the cave, Jim. After a while, Jim also realized they wouldn't be able to free Donald on their own. Donald explained that some rocks had loosened when he slid and were now wedging against his body. Each time they tried to pull him backward, the loose rocks would slide forward and block the passage. Jim exited the cave to call for help. Cave rescue specialists and the police arrived, and because only one person could squeeze into that narrow space at a time, they tried using ropes to free Donald. This didn't work either, so they brought in tools to try breaking some of the rocks. However, given how tight the space was, hours of work led to only small breakthroughs, and Donald's situation grew worse. He was thirsty, hungry, and in a very cold environment, so hypothermia was a major concern. The cavers considered entering from the other side to give Donald food and water, but they found that the passage leading to where he laid was extremely narrow. Only 2 very small cavers, sisters Lynn and Nancy Taylor, were able to fit, but even then, they couldn't reach Donald's head. This meant there was no way of delivering supplies, so rescuers had to act quickly. They decided to dig from above ground, down to where Donald was stuck. The process lasted all day Sunday, getting them close to the required depth. Unfortunately, though, they were about 12 feet away from Donald's position, so they needed to dig laterally. Meanwhile, Donald began giving only grunting responses, which indicated he was likely suffering from hypothermia. On Monday morning, as 2 days passed from when he got stuck, the digging continued, but the team encountered another problem: extremely hard bedrock layers that were impossible to dig through. At this point, they weren't sure if Donald was still alive, so they sent a nurse into the cave with a handheld Doppler machine to see if he still had a pulse. She couldn't detect one, but this wasn't definitive proof of death, since she only had access to his very cold legs. Sometimes, the body's core organs can continue functioning after the extremities have stopped registering a pulse. Seeing how quickly Donald's condition was deteriorating, rescuers started using their most extreme tools, including—
That is absolutely terrible. Imagine that. He literally almost died. That's just crazy. Well, he did die. He probably did die, because how do you get hypothermia? I guess it is cold under the caves, I'm guessing. That is crazy. Stuff like that is insane. We're gonna try using explosives next. Oh man.
dynamite, which was extremely risky but appeared to be the only option left. On Tuesday morning, they finally managed to reach his location, and a doctor was sent in immediately, but as many feared, Donald had died. It took an entire day to retrieve his body, and an autopsy later confirmed he had succumbed to hypothermia sometime between Sunday night and Monday morning. Following his death, the cave system was restricted to limited access. Agent Allwed incident. Roger Solari and Martin Farr, aged 26 and 23 respectively, wanted to map out the Agent Allwed cave system in South Wales. At the time, John Parker, another explorer—
Alright guys, we're going to stop right there. Wow, that was very interesting.